Is not there. And the last time I saw even small rains, it turned into Venice. It was a beautiful canal for people and their boats.
Okay.
So Shehzad, even the idea, Amit Shah himself, the Home Minister, in a recent interview admitted that he had legacy problems and infrastructure had been ignored in Bangalore, in and around. Which
Shehzad, quick response, and then I'll open this up to
Zaka,
Prakash
yours
Balwadi and Ratna.
yours is one of the few
Yeah,
shows.
let him respond. Quick response.
Zaka, yours is one of the few shows where we can actually talk about the issues of the people, and therefore I'll place some facts. Aishwarya, please listen. You tell me what you did between 13 to 18. I'll tell you what we did between 18 to 23. 5,000 kilometers of road, 1,700 kilometers of state highway, national highways doubled, new industrial estates in North Karnataka, Belagavi, Chamarajnagar, Kalaburgi, Tumkur. We've started the startup park near Kempegowda Airport. Today, Karnataka, almost 40 unicorns come from Karnataka. 7,500 crore for railways. You gave 4,000 crores in the last 5 years. We gave 7,500 crores. 15,000 crores for the suburban rail project. 12 minor ports. Apart from that, we gave 7 model universities, IIT at Raichur and at Dharwad. 1.5 lakh tablets. 8,000. These are tablets for students. 8,700 crores for scholarships. Sugarcane FRP was increased from 22,000 to 23,000. Just one last point.
I'm sorry. I don't interrupt, but you know, this is not a campaign speech. You're rattling off stuff.
No, people should know.
No, of course people should know.
Just give me one
spokesperson after spokesperson is going on TV, and none of them are talking about what you're talking about. They're all talking about Nalayak Beta and Zahirila Sam. Why is that?
Zaka, I am the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and in that capacity, may I speak, Zaka?
One second, Aishwarya.
Zaka, I am the national spokesperson, and I believe that the people of Karnataka need to know that the unemployment rate in Karnataka is 2.1%. In Rajasthan, it is 20% plus. The sugarcane FRP was increased by 10,000 rupees per ton by us. MSP of tur dal was increased by 50%, ragi by 138%. I want to ask Aishwarya Mahadev, during her period, today we are giving 10,000 rupees to farmers, to 54 lakh farmers. How much did she give? And the reason why we are bringing that Nalayak Beta up is because their leaders, because they have nothing to show about what they've done in Karnataka.
Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost, and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. A third US bank has fallen. First Republic had been in trouble for a while now. A lot was done to keep it afloat, but evidently it was not enough. It's been sold, and it's triggered a lot of uncertainty. Is this the end of the US banking crisis or the worsening of it? We'll discuss that tonight. Also, it's May Day. France is bracing for massive protests, but bigger disruption awaits the world. 14 million jobs will be lost in the next 5 years, and technology will drive this change. The question is, are we ready for it? Where will the new jobs be created? And the King of Britain is getting ready for his coronation this week. British lawmakers want citizens to pledge allegiance to King Charles. Also, pediatricians are recommending weight loss injections for obese children. Are medicines the only way to keep children healthy? We'll discuss that. The headlines first. Pakistan Minister Hina Rabbani Khar warns against sacrificing China partnership for the United States. She argues that Pakistan can no longer maintain a middle ground between Beijing and Washington. This is part of a secret memo accessed by the US and leaked subsequently. Wagner boss has a dire warning for Russia, says he'll withdraw troops from Bakhmut unless his forces get more ammunition. This comes as casualties mount in the battle for the eastern Ukrainian city. Conservative economist Santiago Pina wins Paraguay's presidential election. He's pledged to maintain the country's long-standing relations with Taiwan. G7 digital ministers agree that member nations should adopt risk-based regulation of artificial intelligence. This as AI applications such as ChatGPT take the world by storm. And tributes pour in from across the world as MasterChef judge Jock Zonfrill dies at the age of 46. The police are yet to provide a cause for his untimely death. How was your weekend? If you have savings in an American bank or if you work for an American bank, chances are you spend the last few days worrying about your finances. That's because another US bank has collapsed. We're talking about the First Republic Bank. It is the second largest bank failure in American history and the third bank failure since March this year. First Republic has been teetering for weeks now. 2 months back, it got a cash injection. 11 banks came together to save it. They injected $30 billion into First Republic, but the bank could not be saved. So this weekend, American regulators made some tough decisions. They took over First Republic, and now JP Morgan Chase will take over its assets. This has triggered more uncertainty. Is the US banking crisis ending, or is it getting worse? It started with the Silicon Valley Bank. We told you about it. It was the first American bank to collapse this year, the Silicon Valley Bank. Then another bank fell, the Signature Bank in New York. Days later, First Republic shot into headlines. This was in the month of March. The bank had lost some $100 billion. There were mass withdrawals, depositors began to flee, and now this bank is being bought. It's quite a dramatic story, in fact. First Republic is into private banking. It mostly serves the wealthy. The bank was started in 1985 with less than 10 employees. By July 2020, it was the 14th largest bank in the US. It had 80 offices, 80 offices in 7 American states and a staff of more than 7,200 people. It looked like a solid bank until crisis hit and it began to crumble. For perspective, look at these numbers. In January 2022, that is last year, one share of First Republic was trading at $200. In April 2023, this year, last month, one share was down to less than $5. So from $200 to less than $5. That's a fall of over 95%. And it's not like the bank did not try to avert the crisis. In the last few months, it tried to cut costs and sell assets. It decided to fire 25% of its staff, to lower the amount of outstanding loans and curb non-essential activities. Plus, it got a rescue package, the $30 billion I told you about. 11 banks gave this money in the form of deposits to First Republic, but it seems none of it was enough. And last week, the regulators took a call. They were going to take over the bank, and this weekend they pulled the trigger. After hectic activity, a buyer has been found. It will be JP Morgan. It will take over most of the assets of First Republic. This includes more than $100 billion in deposits and almost $230 billion in other assets. This includes loans and different kinds of securities. And with that, another messy bank takeover in America is now complete, which brings us to the next question. Is the banking crisis now over? Or is it just beginning? Is it getting worse from here? Honestly, it's hard to say, but here's something that we can say for sure. This crisis was avoidable. And the blame for it should go to America's central bank, the US Federal Reserve. It failed to act. And these are not my words. This is an admission from the central bank itself.
Good afternoon.
They have released a report, an assessment of the Fed's response to the crisis, and this report highlights some clear shortcomings. It says there was a lack of oversight, and US officials failed to anticipate the threat. In fact, let me quote from that report. Federal Reserve supervisors failed to take forceful enough action. SVB's failure, that's Silicon Valley Bank, its failure demonstrates that there are weaknesses in regulation and supervision that must be addressed. Supervisors did not fully appreciate the extent of the vulnerabilities as Silicon Valley Bank grew in size and complexity. When supervisors did identify vulnerabilities, they did not take sufficient steps to ensure that Silicon Valley Bank fixed those problems quickly enough. So they're talking about Silicon Valley Bank, but it applies to the larger banking crisis in America.
The Federal Reserve issued its long-awaited report on the cause of the Silicon Valley Bank failure. And while it put the failure squarely in the hands of management and its board for failing to oversee a safe and sound business plan, the Fed did put some heat on itself that its own bank regulators did not respond quickly enough and forcefully enough to conditions on the ground.
So the US central bank messed up, and bankers around the world paid a price for this. You may remember these headlines. This was right after the collapse of Silicon Valley. Global banks lost $459 billion, financial stocks took a nosedive. The crisis traveled as far as Europe. It claimed the Swiss banking giant. Credit Suisse was taken over by rival UBS, and it brought back memories of 2008, the global financial crisis of 2008. Of course, it was much worse than what we're seeing right now, but it confirms our worst fears. When America sneezes, the world catches a cold. When American financial system makes a mistake, the world foots the bill for it. A new wave of disruption is on the horizon. The pandemic has disrupted everything. The war in Ukraine has broken globalization, and the next wave of upheaval will hit our jobs. Listen to this carefully. 14 million jobs could be eliminated in the next 5 years. 14 million. That's the prediction of the World Economic Forum. They've published a survey just ahead of the International Workers' Day, also known as May Day. It's today, the 1st of May. Workers around the world marched on the streets today. In France, there were massive protests. 1 million workers hit the streets. Many of them are opposing President Macron's new pension policy. We've been discussing it on the show. What about the rest? What are they protesting? Around the world, women and men are marching on Labor Day to ask for better wages, better living standards, better working conditions. But the job market is changing, and changing dramatically. We are in a period of disruption, and we have advance warning. But are we prepared for what's coming? Are we prepared for the loss of another 14 million jobs in 5 years? The report I just mentioned, it surveyed more than 800 companies around the world, and this is what it found. Employers will create 69 million jobs by 2027. 69 million new jobs. But they'll also eliminate jobs. How many? 83 million. And the difference is 14 million. That's the number of jobs that will be lost. So employers will slash more jobs than creating new ones. And you know what will drive this change? Technology. Artificial intelligence. It will change the workplace as we know it. It'll have both positive and negative impacts. It will create jobs for those who can develop and manage AI tools. It will also take away jobs like those that involve record keeping. In fact, the World Economic Forum has made this prediction. It says 26 million record keeping jobs are at risk. They could be eliminated by 2027. So technology will be a big disruptor whether we like it or not. But it won't be the only disruptor. The job market will also be hit by slower economic growth and higher inflation. Also, a major risk that stares us in the face is a redundant workforce. Around the world, 6 out of 10 workers will need training. 44% of a worker's skills need to be updated. Turns out a lot of people do want to upgrade themselves, but they don't have enough opportunities. Only half of the employees surveyed say that they have adequate access to opportunities. This is the global picture. What about India? Well, India will not be insulated from these changes. The World Economic Forum report has a prediction for India too. It says the Indian job market will also see a churn. New jobs will be created in emerging sectors like AI and machine learning. So the shift is quite clear for everyone. The question is, are we ready for it? And the short answer, I'm afraid, is no, we are not. Around the world, labor unrest is on the rise. Dock workers have staged walkouts. Rail workers and public servants are protesting. Ports around the world are witnessing agitations. Let me show you some data, in fact. In 2021, there were just 8 cases of protests and strikes at the world's leading ports. Last year, this number shot up dramatically. From 8, it went up to 38. That's a jump of almost 400%. Why are so many workers angry? They're deeply impacted by the growing inflation. They say their wages have been stagnant for decades. They want a raise. And we've seen this before. In the 1800s, there was a series of protests. From Germany to France, England, and the US, workers had a single, simple demand. They wanted their work hours reduced. They were working for 12 to 15 hours. They wanted this reduced to just 8 hours a day. And this led to the first round of May Day strikes. In the US, the May Day protests began with a bloody massacre. The year was 1886. Workers took out a rally in Chicago. Again, they wanted to work for fewer hours. They assembled at the Haymarket Square. Suddenly, bombs went off. Unknown attackers targeted the workers. It led to a massive riot. At least 11 people died. This event was a turning point in American history. It led to major labor reforms in the US. This was more than 100 years ago. The job sector is dramatically different today. 60% of the jobs in existence today were not even around in the 1940s. We are in the year 2023. The world is at a similar crossroads. Today we are witnessing fresh protests. But do we have a solution? Not immediately, but we do need a solution urgently, and policymakers must act, else they'll have a new crisis on their hands, a crisis of jobs, or joblessness to be more precise. Those who have a job want better wages. But the reality is this: the companies that employ them are looking for ways to hire fewer people. And technology is driving this disruption. It's inevitable. Our best bet is to innovate and prepare. Neighborhood first. I know it sounds like your society's president's favorite slogan, but it's also a geopolitical reality. Strong and friendly neighbors are a boon. Scheming and unstable ones, well, not so much. The current Indian government has made this a cornerstone of its foreign policy. Neighborhood first. All neighbors have benefited from this, but one country stands out, and that's the Maldives. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh is in the Maldives on a 3-day visit. He has some big meetings lined up. Maldivian President Ibrahim Soli will meet him. So will the defence and foreign ministers of the country. Rajnath Singh will also hand over some military hardware to the Maldives. One is a fast patrol vessel ship. The other is a landing craft. Both these will be used by the Maldivian National Defence Forces. So that's the official agenda. What about the political objectives? This trip is important for two broad reasons. Number one, reaffirming India's commitment to the Maldives. It sounds generic, right? But not if you consider what China is up to. In the last decade, China has expanded its footprint in the Maldives. It is upgrading airports, building houses, bridges, even harbors. But the downside is this: a lot of loans. Reports say the Maldives owes China around $1.4 billion. Their total GDP is just $5.4 billion, and they have loans worth $1.4 billion. So India has been trying to reverse this process to once again become the #1 partner of the Maldives. We'll talk about that later. But for the moment, let me tell you about the second reason. The Maldives will be holding elections in September. It promises to be a consequential one for India. Why? Because support for New Delhi is not bipartisan in Mali. It depends on which party is in power. The current president, Ibrahim Soli, is closer to India. He says his policy is India first. And the opposition? Well, exactly the opposite. The Maldivian opposition has been running an anti-India campaign. It's called India Out. Its poster boy is this man, former President Abdullah Yameen. He ruled the Maldives from 2013 to 2018, and during this period, he pushed the country closer to China. He joined the Belt and Road Initiative. He signed a free trade agreement, and he also saddled his country with Chinese debt. So what does he want now? He wants a return to closer ties with China. Yameen is expected to challenge Soli in the month of September. But as things stand, he cannot contest. He was convicted of corruption and money laundering last year. Unless he can clear his name, he won't be on the ballot. Nonetheless, the opposition agenda is clear: push out Indian influence from the Maldives. The question is why? India has consistently contributed to the Maldivian growth story. $500 million in grants, not loans, grants, $500 million, $800 million in a line of credit. Not to mention the vast defense cooperation. Around 70% of the Maldivian defense training is done by India. A lot of equipment also comes from India. And ironically, that is exactly what the opposition has a problem with. They've accused India of violating Maldivian sovereignty. They say India has stationed troops in the country, which is all bluster, by the way. But as we have seen with hyper-nationalists, bluster can be effective. The fact is, maritime security is non-negotiable for the Maldives. They need well-trained sailors. They need modern landing craft. They also need Indian intelligence. There is nothing nefarious about any of this. It's common bilateral practice. India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives regularly conduct drills in the Indian Ocean. The idea is to be prepared for any challenge, like natural disasters or shipping accidents, even pirates. So in recent years, defense has become a cornerstone of this relationship. Since 2016, India and the Maldives have been holding defense cooperation dialogues. The last one was held just 2 months back in March 2023. So from India's perspective, the plan is quite clear. Keep supporting development and defense projects. Don't give China an opportunity to sweep in. But that also depends on the domestic politics in the Maldives. New Delhi must work harder to win hearts and minds, to make sure that the anti-India sentiment is contained. And how do you do that? Well, soft power always works. India sends the most number of tourists to the Maldives, even more than China and the US, and that's one place to start, tourism. So are historical links and cultural links. The Maldivian language traces its roots to Sanskrit and Pali. There is also interest in Indian movies and songs. The idea should be to capitalize on all of this, to convert this relationship into a bipartisan one. If not, it will be a missed opportunity for both sides. Do you remember the Indo-Pacific? I won't blame you if you don't. It was all the rage before last year, but then Russia invaded Ukraine and suddenly all the attention is back on Europe. But that does not mean the Indo-Pacific is doing any better. The Chinese threat is still there. Maritime incursions, unnecessary military drills, it's all happening in the shadow of Ukraine. But that's the thing about geopolitics. You cannot afford to be distracted or myopic. You must be ready to multitask. The question is Joe Biden up to that challenge? Well, his schedule certainly says he is. The US president hosted the South Korean president last week. This week, he's hosting the president of the Philippines. And later this month, he's hitting the road. Papua New Guinea first and Australia after that. All these trips and summits are focused on one region, the Indo-Pacific. Let's begin with the ongoing one. The president of the Philippines landed in Washington on Sunday. This man, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., a.k.a. Bong Bong Marcos, that's what he's called. He'll be meeting Joe Biden later today. It promises to be a tough balancing act for him. On the one hand, Marcos wants to deepen his ties with the US, forge an even stronger relationship, he says. Those were his words. At the same time, he's keen to be on China's good books. He has promised a quote-unquote golden age in relations with China. So it'll be a balancing act. And for Joe Biden, this meeting is already a concession. Let me tell you why. Senator Biden was a critic of Marcos Sr. This was back in the 70s and 80s. Marcos was a dictator. He ruled the Philippines for 20 years. Now his son is in power, and President Biden is courting him. The same son who has lawsuits pending against him in US courts. He is being welcomed by the US president. So much for putting principles first. Looks like Biden has suddenly discovered political pragmatism. Either way, today's talks will heavily feature defense. The US has access to 9 military bases in the Philippines. The assumption is they will be key in the defense of Taiwan. Now, Marcos has tried to play it safe so far. He granted America access to more bases. At the same time, he stopped them from storing lethal weapons. Sort of like a half measure. Biden will be hoping to bring the Philippines firmly into his corner. His job is to reaffirm US commitment on 2 things. One is mutual defense. The second is financial assistance and development. So that's Joe Biden's agenda this week, getting the Philippines on board. Later this month, he'll be traveling to Papua New Guinea, the first American president to travel there in more than a century. And that should tell you something about the neglect. In Papua New Guinea, Biden will attend the Pacific Islands Forum. 18 leaders of the Pacific Islands will be present. So will the leaders of Australia and New Zealand. Interestingly, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be in the country. He too will meet the Pacific leaders. And that should tell you how much attention this region is now getting. In fact, Joe Biden's Pacific pivot started last year. He hosted Pacific leaders at the White House. He also pledged aid and dispatched Vice President Kamala Harris on a tour. Now he himself is on the job. The question is, will it be enough? Because the US has long ignored these islands in the Pacific. It had unmatched military power in the region, so nothing else mattered. Not financial aid, not infrastructure projects, not climate change investments. But China was playing the long game here. China is now the biggest bilateral lender in the region, much bigger than America and Australia. It has funded more than 100 projects. I'm talking about roads, airstrips, ports, strategic assets with civilian and military uses. China has an investment in all of them. And last year, it pushed for even greater influence. China pitched a security pact with 10 Pacific nations. It was a sweeping proposal. Reports say it would have given China military bases in the region, even allowed them to deploy troops. Thankfully, the Pacific nations rejected it. And that rejection should give Biden some hope. But if he wants to recruit Pacific Islands against Beijing, he must do two things. A, put his money where his mouth is. The Pacific Islands need help to fight against climate change. It's an existential threat for them. They need millions of dollars in investment to tackle it. And secondly, Biden needs to build a broad coalition. The US alone cannot convince the islands, but a broader alliance of democracies can, which is why Prime Minister Modi's presence could be a game changer here. The Pacific Islands have already been let down by the US, Australia and New Zealand, but India is different. India is a member of the Global South, and it's now on the high table. India's lessons and skills could be key for the Pacific region. In return, New Delhi will also get some valuable diplomatic support, because don't forget, every vote counts at the UN. And the Pacific Forum alone has 18 votes. All these meetings and trips will conclude at the Opera House in Sydney. That's where the Quad leaders are meeting. It's not going to be an easy mission for Joe Biden. You can't neglect countries for decades and expect them to support you later. Biden's test will be convincing Pacific leaders about his campaign slogan in 2020, that America is back. That's what Britain is up to, or at least some Britons. They're counting down to the farce of the century, a coronation in 2023. If you thought that was problematic, listen to the details. Apparently, there is an oath of allegiance to King Charles. The church has asked all Britons to take the oath. Correction there, not all Britons, all subjects, which means Canadians must take the oath. So must Australians. And don't forget the island dwellers in the Caribbean. They too must swear allegiance to a man who lives in a castle thousands of kilometers away. I get what you're thinking. Surely the church does not mean it. It's just part of the long-standing coronation traditions. Well, get ready to be surprised, because UK ministers are raring to go. They can't wait to take the oath of allegiance. Transport Secretary Mark Harper is one of them. He thinks it's a fantastic opportunity. The Labour Party thinks it's a lovely idea to involve the people, their words, not mine, but a fantastic opportunity for what exactly? To be tone deaf? To insult the concept of human equality, or to forget that you're living in a democracy? There is only one place for an oath of allegiance, and that is the history books. I know it's part of the royal traditions, but that does not make it right. If anything, it tells you why the whole institution is problematic, and the monarchy realizes this. They're trying hard to make the coronation fit for 2023. For example, it will feature women members of the clergy for the first time. It will also feature leaders from other faiths, namely Jewish, Hindu, Muslim and Sikh. They will all present Charles with coronation symbols. We say full marks for trying, but the truth is you cannot disguise a dinosaur. You can add layers of clothing. You can call it by different names, but none of it changes the reality, and that's what the monarchy is, a dinosaur. Let me tell you why. For all this multi-faith display, the ceremony itself is deeply Christian. King Charles won't promise to defend secularism. He will be promising to defend the Protestant Reformed religion, aka Christianity. You see the problem here? Britain is a secular country, but the symbolic head of its government is a protector of just one religion. His appointment is based on one religion. Which brings us to another interesting episode of the coronation. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has a key role to play. He's got some reading to do. Rishi Sunak must read from the biblical book of Colossians during the coronation. Now remember, Sunak is a practicing Hindu. He took his oath of office on the Bhagavad Gita. But on Friday, he must read out from a biblical book. Is that a problem? Well, ideally, it's not. Reading other religious books will do you no harm. In fact, it may enrich your own ideas about religion. Having said that, this is not some leisure reading. This is an official obligation for a non-Christian prime minister. How is that okay in secular Britain? All these controversies bring us back to the same point. You simply cannot drag a coronation into 2023. Why? Because it runs contrary to everything that defines modern life. Children don't obey their parents nowadays. Are you really expecting them to pay allegiance to a 74-year-old king they haven't met? It's beyond bizarre. It's insulting to self-respecting citizens of Britain, and don't forget the former colonies. Allegiance to the king means something very different for them, sort of like reliving their trauma. So the royal family should stop wasting its time trying to modernize an outdated institution. There is nothing modern about golden carriages, looted jewels, and thrones. Might as well revert to their 19th century strategy. We are entitled royals, just deal with it. Now let's turn from an incoming king to an outgoing feudal ruler. Turkey has some news. No, not that kind of news. Erdogan is still in power very much. In fact, he made an announcement yesterday. He said Turkish forces have killed the leader of ISIS. The latest ISIS leader was codenamed Abu Hussein al-Qureshi. He took charge of the terrorist group in November last year. This was after his predecessor was killed by Syrian forces. And now this leader has been neutralized too. But the war against the ISIS is still on. It began in 2014. The terrorists wanted to set up an Islamic caliphate. They were at war with American, Syrian and Turkish forces and a host of regional militias. Now 4 of its heads have been killed. Our next report has more.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan made an announcement yesterday. He announced a victory in the fight against terrorism.
I would like to share a new information with our public during this broadcast. There has been a development that shows a determined fight against terrorist organizations. Our National Intelligence Organization has been following the so-called leader of Daesh, codenamed Abu Hussein al-Qureshi, for a long time. This is the first time I'm announcing this news, that this individual was neutralized as part of an operation by the Turkish National Intelligence Organization in Syria yesterday. God willing, we will continue our fight against terrorist organizations without any exception.
Erdogan says Abu Hussein al-Qureshi was killed on Saturday. He was neutralized in a raid overseen by Turkey's National Intelligence Organization, the MIT. Syrian locals and security forces say the raid took place in the northern Syrian town of Cinderes. The town is controlled by Turkey-backed rebel groups. A resident says clashes started on the edge of Cinderes overnight from Saturday into Sunday. They took place at an abandoned farm that was being used as an Islamic school. The clashes reportedly lasted for about an hour. Residents say they were followed by an explosion. After that, security forces surrounded the area and prevented anyone from entering. ISIS has not made any announcement about its leader's death. Neither has the Turkey-backed opposition group known as the Syrian National Army. This is the group that has a security presence in the area. But even if ISIS acknowledges the death of Abu Hussein al-Qureshi, it is unlikely to be the end of the conflict. He will be the 4th ISIS leader killed by various anti-terrorism forces. Multiple forces have been fighting ISIS since 2014, and over the years, they've killed multiple ISIS leaders. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was the first so-called caliph. He took on the title in June 2014. This was when ISIS was at its peak. Baghdadi was killed in October 2019 by American forces. He was followed by his deputy, Abu Ibrahim al-Qureshi. This leader was killed in February 2022. He was also taken out by US forces. The third so-called caliph was Abu al-Hassan al-Qureshi. He lasted less than a year. He was killed by one of the many rebel groups in Syria in October 2022. They allied with the Syrian government to bring this ISIS leader down. Which brings us to the leader Turkey says it killed on Saturday, Abu Hussein al-Qureshi. He was in charge of ISIS for just 5 months. The tenures of the ISIS leaders are steadily dwindling, but the group still remains dangerous. Its offshoots in various parts of the world still cause havoc. It has the ability to inspire lone wolf attacks. This is when someone is radicalized and conducts a terror attack on their own. Lone wolf attacks are some of the hardest to stop because there is no group conspiring to commit it, and the attackers are always ready to die. The fact that ISIS encourages these attacks makes it as deadly as ever outside the territory it controls. The fight against terror demands constant vigilance, and until ISIS is completely uprooted, it won't stop. They'll just keep appointing new leaders one after the other, leaders who keep inspiring terror and lead to deaths around the world.
In the Sudan, there's no end to the fighting, and it seems no point in declaring a ceasefire either, because the violence just doesn't stop. On paper, the ceasefire was extended on Sunday for another 72 hours, but Sudan's army continues to bomb the capital, Khartoum. The armed forces are fighting a paramilitary group called the RSF, Rapid Support Forces, RSF. They're fighting for power. The worst hit is Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, also volatile regions like Darfur. Thousands of civilians have fled to neighboring nations. Some are taking land routes to Egypt or Chad. Others are flocking to Port Sudan at the Red Sea. They're trying to board evacuation ships.
Sudan is living through a moment of real terror. I'm talking about dead bodies in the streets. We smelled the dead bodies as we were coming from Khartoum. The firing, the shelling. Sudan is seriously in a state of real war.
The death toll keeps rising. The official figure is 500. The United Nations has reported a similar number, but it says the actual figure is most certainly much higher. And this is a conflict that the Sudan can ill afford. It was already among the poorest countries in sub-Saharan Africa. More than 600,000 children were being treated for acute malnutrition here. Now the fighting has made it worse. The supply of life-saving aid is being disrupted.
It's a very difficult situation in Sudan, and the context is complex in the sense that the scale of this conflict encompasses 2/3 of the country, essentially, the Darfur, Kordofans, Khartoum. So it's a very insecure situation that we're all finding ourselves in. But the work continues. The work is continuing, and we just really pray for peace in those conditions to be able to enable even more delivery of services and scale up of those services.
She says the conflict encompasses 2/3 of the country. Does this mean the Sudan is facing another civil war? Considering its history, this is definitely possible. The army is led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the country's de facto ruler. He took power in a coup in 2021. His opponent is a man called General Mohammad Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti. He leads the paramilitary force called RSF. Now, Burhan and Hemedti were allies during the 2021 coup, but since then they've fallen out, and now they've taken up arms against each other. What triggered the fight? Well, they couldn't agree on how the country will transition into a democracy and who will control the RSF. How will it be incorporated into the Sudanese army? Ostensibly, this is what the fight was about. But make no mistake, this is a battle for power. As things stand, democracy is not coming to Sudan anytime soon. Burhan has said he will never sit down with Hemedti. Both groups are backed by foreign governments, and they have their own agendas. There have been repeated ceasefires, but they fail to hold. The threat of a civil war looms, and it won't be a first for the Sudan. For much of its independent history, this country has seen civil war and conflict. The Sudan was jointly ruled by Britain and Egypt. In 1956, it got independence. 1 year before that, the first civil war had already begun. It lasted till 1972. Then in 1983, the second civil war began. It went on till the year 2005. It resulted in the division of the country. A separate nation of South Sudan was formed in 2011. The previous civil wars were broadly based on ethnic and religious fault lines, but this one is different. Because this time both leaders, Burhan and Hemedti, belong to the same ethno-religious group. Their fight is about power, not secession. But it makes little difference to the people who are suffering.
If we fail to act now, it will be too late. The rainy season is coming in few weeks. And if we don't provide any assistance to the people, the road will be blocked and all the refugees here will be stopped. And we definitely need to provide assistance in terms of water, health, and shelter as quickly as possible in order to, food also, in order to ensure that people are safe and protected.
The Sudan has seen thousands killed and millions displaced over the years. The constant violence has left it impoverished. Another civil war will destroy this country. The combatants and their foreign governments backing them need to stop and come to the talking table. Do you know of children with type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol? Their numbers are much higher than you would imagine, and they're growing. Until a few years back, this was almost unheard of. Blood pressure, diabetes and cholesterol were believed to be problems for middle-aged people. But now data shows that's no longer the case, especially in the UK. Cases of type 2 diabetes in children have jumped by 50% in the last 5 years. And a lot of this is linked to one problem: obesity. What's obesity? Abnormal or excessive fat accumulation in the body. It's a health risk. And in Britain, it's a national emergency. We're talking about child obesity in particular. It's a national emergency in the UK. Look at the numbers. There's a 50% jump in just 1 year. 1 in 7 children start primary school obese. 10% of 5-year-olds are obese in the UK. And in the case of 10-year-old children, more than 20% are obese. This poses a huge problem for the country, and they want to fix it. In fact, they've been trying to fix it for a while now, but nothing seemed to have worked. So Britain has come up with a new solution: a weight loss injection for children. They're selling it as a friendly neighborhood drug and calling it the skinny jab. It will be administered by the NHS, that's the National Health Service, England's publicly funded healthcare system. And this injection is not new. Earlier, it was approved for use by adults. Now it can be given to children too, those between 12 and 17 years of age. Is this the best way for children to fight obesity? Does the jab work? Well, a new study says it does. It was conducted over a period of 15 months. The subjects were 180 children aged 12 to 17. What the drug did was this: it suppressed their appetite. It reduced their body mass index by 16%, which may sound like a good result, but it's also a short-term result. And it's triggered a wider debate on children's health. Must we inject them with medicines to suppress their appetite? Turns out the UK is not the only country trying this. America is already using it. For children of the same age group, 12 to 17, they're using the same injection. They're calling it a game changer. Where does this leave time-tested strategies like exercising and following a balanced diet? Also, how big a challenge is obesity to start with? In our world today, more than 1 billion people are obese. Out of these, 340 million are adolescents and 39 million are children. Which are the worst hit places? Cook Islands, it's the worst hit, with 33% children suffering from obesity. In the US, this number is 23%. India, about 3%, according to data. Worldwide, these numbers are only increasing. So there's no denying that this is a major problem. But I come back to the question: are injections the best way to fix it? Is medication the only solution? Remember, this jab does not reset weight gain mechanisms. It only makes you want to eat lesser by suppressing your appetite. So it really does not address the root problems like genetics or lifestyle issues. And there's a clear lack of data. Also possible side effects like nausea, fatigue, heartburn, and a painful condition called acute pancreatitis. This drug could medicalize a whole generation, and that sounds scary. So even if it brings down the number of obese children, we have to ask, at what cost? For our last story today, let's talk about art. It's compelling, it's enticing, it always inspires reaction, good, bad, or hungry. No, that last bit was not a faux pas. Because for some, art can even be a snack. You may remember this: a banana duct taped to a wall. It was called art. It was worth $120,000. This was so strange, it became a viral moment in recent art history. Guess what happened then? The banana has now been eaten by an art student in South Korea. He said he was hungry, so he ate the piece of art and then he taped the peel to the wall. When questioned further, he's said to have said that he modified art. Can you blame him? Does art have to be bizarre and insanely expensive, or are we missing something here?
Imagine a fruit taped to your bedroom wall. An everyday fruit like a banana or an apple, barely fixed in place with a simple duct tape. Nothing fancy about it. Actually, that's us being polite. Frankly, it's weird and a little messed up. What if a child did that to your wall? They'd probably get scolded. What if an adult family member did it? They'd probably get shifty looks and an earful. You'd even be concerned about their mental well-being. But hey, this isn't real life. It's the mind-boggling world of art. And apparently, anything goes here. A few years ago, an artist named Maurizio Catalan did just that. He duct-taped a banana to a wall, and he titled this work Comedian. It invited some humor for sure. Also memes. It went viral. And it was hailed as one of the most open-minded and inspiring works of modern art. Then, it was sold for $120,000. Now, don't you wish you were crazy enough to come up with it first? Jokes aside, why are we talking about this now? Because this banana has been gobbled up. A South Korean student took it off and ate it. He then taped its peel back on the wall. Worry not, the banana is replaced every 2 or 3 days, so no charges were pressed. Regardless, the student was unfazed. He says he was hungry. He calls it an act of rebellion. The artwork itself stands for going against logic, which makes it art, at least according to some. So the student believes that him eating it is art too, because it's rebellion against rebellion. And damaging art is art too. If you think this is confusing, we're right there with you. Why does art have to be so weird? What happened to nice portraits and correct-looking shapes? When did splashes of color on canvas or random creatures stealing gloves become art? Because just look at this. This art is by Max Klinger, and it's famous. It's supposed to show a woman losing her glove. For starters, we can't understand what the creature is, or where the glove is. Points to us for figuring out where the hands are. It doesn't make any sense, yet we can't take our eyes off it. The artist is trying to show people's obsession with simple objects, our possessions. And that's the thing about art. It can mean whatever we want it to. And what about artwork that looks like a child made it? Experts say there's usually a lot of logic that goes into each piece, a lot of emotions. But does that still explain why it's selling for such big bucks? Like this sculpture, it's by Jeff Koons. It was made in 1986. And guess how much it was sold for? Over $91 million. In what world does this make sense? Maybe we can ask the super rich? Because it's mainly thanks to them that the art industry is booming. It's worth over $65 billion. They continue to pour billions into art. For many, it's an investment. So are we missing something here? Do we lack spidey senses to understand art? Is there some inherent cleverness that makes some appreciate art more? Not really. Art is what we make of it. If art looks wacky, weird, beautiful or scary, that's what it's supposed to mean, at least to us. There are no correct answers. Sometimes it's about putting a fruit up on the wall. Other times it's about eating that same fruit. Sometimes both are art. Other times, neither.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with the US, a powerful tornado in Florida overturned cars and destroyed houses. Authorities are cleaning the debris and assessing the damage. In China, a wingsuiter successfully flew through the Tiananmen cave, becoming the first Chinese man to ever do so. In Venezuela, Russian gymnasts participated at the Alba Games under their flag. And finally, what makes May the 1st significant, apart from the fact that it's May Day? We're taking you back in history. On this day, Fidel Castro banned elections and declared Cuba a socialist country. The year was 1961. Castro was addressing hundreds of thousands of Cubans at a May Day parade. He identified himself as a Marxist and Leninist. This happened right after the US government made an attempt to overthrow Castro's government, but was unsuccessful. He was unapologetically anti-American. It established close ties with the Soviet Union. During his rule, Castro created a one-party government. He wanted to control all aspects of Cuba's politics and economy. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Holy cow.
Oh my God, it's like right in front of it. Oh my God.
FRP was increased from 22,000 to 23,000. Just one last point.
One last point. I'm sorry. I don't interrupt. But you know, this is not a campaign speech. You're rattling off stuff.
No, people should know.
No, of course people should know. Spokesperson after spokesperson is going on TV, and none of them are talking about what you're talking about. They're all talking about Nalayak Beta and Zahirila Sam. Why is that?
Zaka, I am the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and in that capacity, may I speak, Zaka?
One second,
Zaka, I am the national spokesperson, and I believe that the people of Karnataka need to know that the unemployment rate in Karnataka is 2.1%. In Rajasthan, it is 20% plus. The sugarcane FRP was increased by 10,000 rupees per ton by us. MSP of tur dal was increased by 50%, ragi by 138%. I want to ask Aishwarya Mahadev, during her period, today we are giving 10,000 rupees to farmers, to 54 lakh farmers. How much did she give? And the reason why we are bringing that Nalayak Beta up is because their leaders, because they have nothing to show about what they've done in Karnataka or in any other government, they abuse us, and we call that out. But Zaka,
one second. I need to go. To two others. There are two other guests. Let me go to Prakash Belwadi first. Prakash, it comes back to a very simple, fundamental question, and that is, as far as I'm concerned, any voter anywhere in Karnataka or any state, anywhere in the country should be asking himself or herself a very simple question. Has my life changed for the better in the last 5 years? If it has, there is a case to vote back the incumbent government. If it hasn't, then there is no case to vote back the incumbent government. Other than this, everything else is just surround sound, whether it is freebies, whether it is communal attacks, whether it is personal attacks. Is that how a majority of the people in Karnataka are seeing this? That all of this is just surround sound between the politicians? Ultimately, has the lot of the people improved?
You know, Zaka, you've been in Bangalore before, and you know that, Bangalore is miles ahead in terms of development compared to the rest of Karnataka. Everybody aspires to be in Bangalore. All the most important revenue generating economic power of Karnataka is Bangalore. It's really sad. There's not another city with a population in excess of 1 million in Karnataka. And that there is a real problem.
Hello
everyone, welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Breaking news coming in from the state of Uttar Pradesh, where BSP's Afzal Ansari has been disqualified as a Lok Sabha member after he was convicted and sentenced to 4 years to a jail sentence in a kidnapping and murder case. Ansari, the Lok Sabha member from Ghazipur, was sentenced to 4 years in jail by an MP-MLA court on Saturday. His brother, criminal turned politician Mukhtar Ansari, was also convicted in the same case and was sentenced to 10 years in jail. That's the piece of breaking news that's coming in. I'm joined by my colleague Pranshu Mishra on the phone line. Pranshu, so a big blow to the BSP after conviction of Afzal Ansari. Now he has been removed as the MP of Ghazipur.
Well, I'll say that it's not just only a setback for the BSP, which of course loses one member of parliament in Lok Sabha, but more than that, it's a story about how the political clout which the Ansari family was having, in fact, with Mukhtar being behind the bars, other family members also being on the run, Mukhtar's son Abbas, who is the MLA from Mau, he also being behind the bars. Afzal Ansari was the only face, from within the Ansari family, about whom many people have said that, he's actually a politician, not much involved as far as the larger mafia activity of the family is concerned. But now with Afzal's first conviction and now his membership being ended from Lok Sabha, it's very clear that the political patronage which this family had because of the fact that Afzal was the member of parliament, that has also been withdrawn. The other important thing, of course, is that, in 2019, when we have seen there was a massive wave of support for the BJP, at that point in time, Afzal Ansari, as a joint candidate of SP and BSP, has defeated BJP stalwart Mr. Manoj Sinha. So clearly in Ghazipur also is a very important constituency in eastern Uttar Pradesh. There, of course, the opposition loses, a heavyweight politician who could have been an actual contender or a challenger to the Bharatiya Janata Party. In that sense, Afzal Ansari's, being dismissed from the membership of the Lok Sabha, setback to the Ansaris, setback to the opposition, and also, a sort of a political gain for the BJP, especially in that eastern pockets of Ghazipur.
Absolutely. And at the same time, in the battle of narratives, Pranshu, this also boosts Yogi Adityanath's image as the chief minister who's tough on crime. This adds into that entire narrative.
Of course, the message which has now gone is that over the past period of 1 year, we have seen 4 convictions and punishments for Mukhtar Ansari. So Mukhtar Ansari, when yesterday we have reported, it was the 4th conviction for Mukhtar Ansari. Apart from that, we have seen that how Atiq Ahmed also in his lifetime has faced first of his convictions and life imprisonment, and now Afzal Ansari. So clearly the government will say that, we have created such an environment over the past few years through our policy of action against the big mafia, that people are now no longer afraid. They are willing to come forward, testify in courts, give their witnesses in the court, and therefore, when often in the past judiciary felt helpless in moving legally against such big mafias, now that procedure has also started. So the big mafia could actually be held accountable through the proper judicial process. And in that context, the government will clearly claim victory by creating that environment which has compelled people to come forward and actually depose against the mafia in several cases.
Right. Thank you, Pranshu, for getting us that piece of breaking news. And shifting focus, with just over a week to go for the Karnataka elections, the abuse war refuses to die down in the poll-bound state. First, Mallikarjun Kharge set the cat among the pigeons, ladies and gentlemen, when he called Prime Minister Modi a poisonous snake. No amount of backtracking and apologies from the Congress chief has stopped the BJP from raining fire on the Congress, accusing it of desperation and frustration at being unable to counter the Prime Minister politically. But the BJP angered the Congress when former Karnataka Minister Basana Gowda Yatnal called former Congress chief Sonia Gandhi a Vish Kanya as well as a Pakistani and Chinese agent. Now the abuse war has been taken forward by Mallikarjun Kharge's son Priyank Kharge, who called the Prime Minister a nalayak beta, claiming he has done nothing for the people of Karnataka. The BJP once again was quick to weaponize the remark, with Karnataka Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai claiming the Congress has been hit by a contagion to abuse the Prime Minister as they fear his name. Mallikarjun Kharge hit back at the BJP, accusing it of twisting his son's words, claiming he was not referring to the Prime Minister. But like previous elections, the BJP is using personal attacks against the Prime Minister as one of its prime weapons to discredit the Congress, a strategy that has worked very well in the past. The Congress, meanwhile, is struggling to turn the attention back to the issue of governance, with Rahul Gandhi accusing the BJP of making the election a personality contest instead of focusing on governance.
ऐसा नालायक बेटा बेटा तो कैसा होता, घर कैसे चलेगा?
Days after Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge stoked a massive controversy by comparing Prime Minister Modi to a poisonous snake, his son Priyank Kharge followed suit, calling the Prime Minister a useless son.
ನಮ್ಮ ಮೂರನೇ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ, ಮೊನ್ನೆ ನೀವು ಗುಲ್ಬರ್ಗಾಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಾಗ ನೀವು ಏನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ ಬಂಜಾರ ಸಮಾಜದವರಿಗೆ? आप सब लोग डरिए मत, बंजारा का एक बेटा दिल्ली में बैठा है अंता। ऐसा नालायक बेटा बेटा तो कैसा होता, घर कैसे चलेगा?
BJP promptly filed a complaint with the Election Commission.
So naturally, those people are frightened, afraid, and with the desperate, this thing they are out of desperation. They are giving such statement. When the father itself gives such a low-level statement, and what do you expect from son?
But Kharge Sr. claimed his son's words were misconstrued.
No, that is very wrong. He never said, don't put these things in his mouth. He attacked the parliament member who abused him.
Over the weekend, Prime Minister Modi accused the Congress of abusing him 91 times.
कांग्रेस के लोग कान खोल करके सुन ले, आपने जब जब जिसको गाली दी है, उन्होंने आपको ऐसी सजा दी है, आप दोबारा खड़े नहीं हो पाए हैं। इस बार कर्नाटका में भी ये गाली का जवाब, इनके सम्मान पर जो चोट पहुंची है, उसका जवाब वोट से दिया जाएगा, वोट से दिया जाएगा।
Congress leader Rahul Gandhi countered the Prime Minister, saying the election is not all about him.
आपको ये बताना चाहिए कि आपने पिछले 3 सालों में कर्नाटक में क्या करवाया। ये चुनाव आपके बारे में नहीं है, ये चुनाव कर्नाटक के जनता और कर्नाटक के भविष्य के बारे में है। आप कहते हो कि कांग्रेस ने मेरे ऊपर 91 बार आक्रमण किया, मगर आप ये कभी नहीं कहते हो कि कर्नाटक के लिए मैंने क्या किया।
Amid the war of words, BJP released its Praja Pranalike or election manifesto for Karnataka, promising uniform civil code, free Nandani milk for those below poverty line, and 3 free LPG cylinders to below poverty line households.
It has got all the ingredients of economic growth, social equality, and it has got a lot of scope for the futuristic thinking for the Karnataka.
But the Congress dismissed this manifesto as nothing but lies.
ನಮ್ಮದು ಪ್ರಣಾಳಿಕೆ ಬಿಡುಗಡೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ ನಾಳೆ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅವರು ಪ್ರಣಾಳಿಕೆ ಬಿಡುಗಡೆ ಮಾಡೋದು ಬೋಗಸ್ಸು. ನಾವು ಪ್ರಣಾಳಿಕೆ ಮಾಡೋದು ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡೋ ಅಂತ ಭರವಸೆಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅವರು ಬೋಗಸ್ ಭರವಸೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದು ನಮಗೂ ಬಿಜೆಪಿಗೂ ಇರತಕ್ಕಂತ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಅದು.
So which way will Karnataka voters swing?
And shifting focus to Jammu and Kashmir, ahead of the G20 meeting in Kashmir, the government will activate a control room within 2 days to ensure all facilities are in place. Security forces will start sanitizing areas around the G20 venue in Srinagar. Frisking of vehicles will start to foil all terror attempts. That's what we're learning from the J&K administration. Well-furnished and decorated shikaras will also be identified for visiting delegates. Those are the plans coming in ahead of the G20 summit in Srinagar. I'm joined by my colleague Ishan on the phone line. Ishan, give us the details.
Well, yes, the government seems to be now in action since only 20-odd days are left for the G20 meeting to start in Kashmir Valley. We're told that government has activated control room, and the time has been given that within 2 days of time, these control rooms should be put in place so that there is a coordination between the departments and to ensure that all the facilities are in place before the G20 meeting. The government is viewing this meeting important because they feel that the tourists from these foreign nations will come to visit Kashmir like we had seen before before the outbreak of militancy, and that's why the entire city is getting a makeover. At the same time, to ensure the safety and security of these delegates, and also to ensure that there is no attack that happens, security forces have started to sanitize the area around the G20 venue. There are friskings will take place now. The vehicles will be searched to file any such attempts. We are also told that because there is a shikara ride on cards, there will be well-furnished and decorated shikaras which will be identified for the visit of these delegates into this world-famous Dal Lake. And then also the government has also right now identifying these vehicles which will ferry these delegates who will be coming to Kashmir Valley because they'll be taken from Srinagar to Gulmarg, and that's an important tourist destination. So for their travel and their commute, these around 20 tempo travelers will also be used. Now remember, the government is looking at this event very seriously. We have already seen that the entire city is getting a makeover, and they want to ensure that all those who visit Kashmir Valley get a different glimpse of what Kashmir has to offer in terms of tourism and the potential that it has.
Right. Thank you, Ishan, for getting us that piece of breaking news. And shifting focus, the political war over the film The Kerala Story continues to snowball, ladies and gentlemen. The movie tells the story of 4 women who were lured, trapped, converted and radicalized to join the ISIS terror group. In fact, according to the film's trailer, at least 32,000 girls from Kerala were converted to Islam and recruited for ISIS. Now, after the Kerala Congress demanded a ban on the movie, calling it a ploy to malign the image of the state, Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan called it a Sangh Parivar plot to spread communal tensions. The Chief Minister even said that the government will take legal action against such an anti-social plot. Moreover, the Muslim Youth League has challenged the makers of the film to prove that 32,000 girls from Kerala were forcibly converted, announcing a 1 crore reward. Congress MP from Trivandrum, Shashi Tharoor, backed the move, taking to Twitter to say that Keralites have every right to say loud and clear that the film is a misrepresentation of their reality. But speaking exclusively to CNN News 18, the film's producer Vipul Shah has said that extensive research has gone into the film, claiming that any ban would be a bid to hide the truth. The BJP has also backed the film, calling it a reflection of the rapid rise of Islamization in the state of Kerala. The political battle lines have been drawn ahead of the film's release on the 5th of May. Now, speaking exclusively to CNN News 18, Vipul Shah defended the claim that 32,000 women were forcibly converted from Kerala, saying the bigger concern than a number is the spread of radicalization in the state.
There is a number that has been talked about in the context of this film. You have claimed that more than 32,000, I mean, that is the claim that is coming from you, that more than 32,000 women were trafficked to fight for ISIS or have become victims of what has been an organized conversion. That data is being questioned.
So I will say something here. So the data, I have my truth and I have all the documents to show that where we've arrived is how we've arrived to this number. And there will be people who will always question, because that's the easiest way of discrediting a film, right? It's the easiest way of discrediting somebody because you get lost into the debate of numbers. The real issue here is that are we going to get lost into the number game, or we are going to do something about this big issue, which is a big problem. I'll tell you a simple thing. The Chief Minister of Kerala, Mr. Achyutanandan, has in press conference announced that Kerala will turn into an Islamic state in 20 years' time. This particular clip that I'm talking about is available on YouTube, right? Mr. Oman Chandi on the floor of assembly has made statement about the number of conversions.
No, but at that time, because I knew you would be talking about it, that statement that was made by the then Kerala Chief Minister, Vipul, was in 2012. He told the assembly that 2,667 young women had converted to Islam between 2006 and 2012. Of these, 2,195 were Hindu girls and 492 were Christian girls. But the larger question is that this is still in thousands. You are talking about running in tens of thousands.
Yeah, so if you have to look at it from that angle, it's not 2,600. There is another article done by India Today where India Today, or maybe I'm getting the name wrong, but there is some news article which I can very happily show you, which talks about Mr. Oman Chandi talking about 7,800 girls, right? So if you extrapolate that number into 20 years, because he's talking about his term of 5 years, if you extrapolate that number into 20 years, official number